The galaxy had gone quiet. No threats, no responses, not even a whisper from Earth. And that's what terrified them all. For 2 decades, humanity had been the loudest, most reckless species in the known universe. They argued in council chambers, challenged ancient empires, punched through borders, and fought like demons with their backs to the void. They never shut up. Their war cries echoed across frequencies. Their political spats were broadcasted on neutral relay stations. You couldn't enter a trade zone without hearing some Earth-born soldier boasting about how his grandfather punched a Terran war beast bare-handed. But then, they stopped. And when humans stopped talking, the rest of the galaxy began to panic. The silence started after the Orion siege. 3 separate empires had blockaded Earth's outbound gates. Not to destroy the humans, they weren't stupid, but to remind them who ruled the stars. It was meant to be a show of strength, a warning. They hit civilian colonies, shut down jump relays, turned orbital stations into cold, drifting tombs. The humans didn't retaliate immediately. They didn't broadcast their rage. They didn't call for allies or revenge. They just went silent. It wasn't submission. It wasn't fear. It was deliberate. It was like a predator going still before the strike. The Council of Sovereigns convened in the deep core sector of Veltrak. 53 species sat around the vast circular chamber, many of them ancient powers who had once reduced entire planets to ash without consequence. And yet, in that moment, they all waited, hesitant to even mention Earth's name. "They've severed all trade," the Harn diplomat rasped through his triple-boned throat. "They've withdrawn their merchant fleets. Their outer colonies have been fortified with no explanation." The Graal sovereign tapped a metallic claw on the obsidian table. "No comms, no diplomatic replies. They aren't even broadcasting distress beacons. It's as if they're ignoring us?" "Worse," the representative from the Vareli hive said in a soft, stinging tone. "They are watching." The humans had always been emotionally volatile. That was their flaw and their strength. They laughed, cried, screamed, mourned, all in the open. You knew what a human was feeling. You knew when they wanted peace, and you damn sure knew when they wanted war. But now, nothing. Not rage, not sorrow, not even their crude sarcasm. Just empty space where noise used to be. And then the rumors started. A Varnan freighter stumbled upon a human strike team wiping out a pirate stronghold that had been untouched for years. No witnesses survived, except the Varnan crew, who had been forced to watch in silence. "They didn't speak," the Varnan captain had whispered. "They killed without a word. No orders, no battle cries. They moved like shadows. Not soldiers, executioners." The Terran, who had once called humans emotion-sick apes, now refused to patrol any sector near former human space. "They don't talk anymore," one of their warriors growled, before resigning from military service. And when a human stops talking, you're already dead. That silence became a language of its own, a warning louder than any broadcast. The protagonist, let's call him Reed, a human who had once served as a diplomatic attaché to the Zell Confederation, sat alone in a station orbiting an abandoned moon. His station wasn't official. It wasn't funded by Earth Command. He was there for one reason: to listen. He was one of the last humans allowed to speak to outsiders, and even that was unofficial. The moment humanity went dark, his name was scrubbed from records. His feed was disconnected from EarthNet. He became a ghost. But he knew something the rest didn't. The silence wasn't just a decision. It was a strategy. Reed looked at the cracked monitor. Another intercepted signal. A fleet from the Scythe Dominion had entered the dead sector again, probing for human presence. Stupid bastards, he muttered. He sipped cold synth coffee and tapped a command. He wasn't military, but his access code still triggered one of Earth's dormant relays. A silent satellite pivoted in the void, tracking the fleet's movement. The humans wouldn't reply, wouldn't threaten, wouldn't posture. They'd just wait. And when the Sith ships reached the wrong beacon, they'd disappear like all the others. No distress call, no black box, just gone. Reed leaned back and stared at the stars. He knew why they were doing this. After centuries of being underestimated, manipulated, and used, humanity had discovered something terrifying. They didn't need permission to dominate. They only needed patience. And patience was silent. Reed hadn't spoken to another human in over 3 years. Not since the official silence order had come down from Earth Command, disguised as a routing failure, then confirmed by what followed. Or didn't. No broadcasts, no replies, no protests. Humanity simply vanished from every known channel, as if the entire species had exhaled and held its breath. He stayed at the fringe of dead space, manning an illegal listening post cloaked in old stealth tech and wrapped in abandoned debris. The hull creaked sometimes, especially when the orbit slipped too close to the moon's thin gravity swell. He didn't mind the noise. It was the only sound he heard most days besides the occasional relay ping or a warning chirp from the deteriorating oxygen scrubbers. He'd repaired them 6 times already. On the 7th, he let them scream for hours before finally fixing them. Silence messed with your head. It forced you to think, forced you to remember. Like the time he watched a diplomatic summit turn into a live-streamed massacre. Or the time the Zell Confederation, all silk words and smug diplomacy, approved a vote to embargo Earth colonies, cutting off medical supplies to hundreds of thousands of civilians on the outer belt, including Reed's niece. She died before the humans could reroute aid through pirate space. They called it economic deterrence. He called it murder. And Earth remembered. Now the silence was vengeance, cold, calculating, unapologetic, and the galaxy hated it. Reed flicked through intercepted comms. Requesting update from Scythe Dominion Scouts, Sector 9D. No response for 48 hours. Awaiting fleet decision. He knew what that meant. The Scythe had pushed into a dark zone again, hoping to provoke a reaction. They'd brought a scout team, a few cruisers, maybe a capital ship, loaded with every scanning system imaginable. But they didn't find signals. They didn't find humans. They just found nothing. And they didn't return. The same pattern repeated across dozens of sectors. Species that once laughed at human stubbornness now whispered warnings in dark halls. They speculated on ghost fleets and vanishing tech. Some claimed humans had developed silent AI-driven warships that operated without orders, patrolled without leaders, and executed without trial. Others said Earth was dead, destroyed by its own wrath, and now its legacy lived on in revenge-fueled machines. But Reed knew the truth was worse. Earth wasn't dead. It was awake, just quiet. The Veltrack council chambers echoed with arguments, fear straining the voices of once dominant species. The Kalari Empress slammed a claw against the marble rail, her luminescent scales twitching in agitation. "This silence is a weapon," she hissed. "One we do not understand, one they never wielded before." The Voreli hive, with its ever-humming voice chamber, emitted a cold verdict. Emotion was the flaw. It made humans predictable, but they have cut out their own weakness. Azuri Prime Scholar floated mid-air, appendages twitching with static. "I warned you all 25 cycles ago, when Earth refused to surrender the Belt Worlds, when they detonated the Sorrow Gate rather than give it up. They nuked their own planet," the Growl Warden muttered, "just to deny us entry. Not nuked, purified, the scholar corrected. They would rather erase a world than allow another to rule it. That is not war. That is madness. Worse, the Kalari Empress said darkly. That is faith. The word rippled across the chamber like a cold wind. Faith in themselves. Faith in their silence. And that scared them more than any weapon. Back on the listening post, Reed stood at the viewport, sipping stale coffee. His beard was longer now, hair graying at the sides. He wasn't military, never had the build or temper for it. But he'd spent years on the fringes of diplomacy, and if there was one thing he'd learned, it was this. Fear spreads faster than truth. And right now, the fear of humanity's silence had become a virus in the galactic mind. He tapped into a private channel, a relic protocol no longer monitored by anyone except exiled humans like him. He didn't expect a response. He never did. But sometimes a blip came through, a digital pulse, a brief, coded acknowledgement from somewhere in deep space. He sent the message anyway. They're still poking the void. Sith fleet vanished 2 days ago. No chatter from command. Just letting you know I'm still listening. R. He stared at the empty line beneath it, waiting. For 10 minutes. 20. Then a blinking light. Just one word. Good. That was all he needed. Someone was out there. Someone who wasn't silent, at least not to him. The relay connection terminated instantly, like it always did. He could never trace it, could never reply. But it was enough to remind him. The silence wasn't just a defense. It was a message. And someone on Earth still controlled the script. The Scythe Dominion held an emergency summit 3 days later. Reports of missing fleets, vanished patrols, and civilian ships being rerouted without explanation had begun to pile up. Panic was settling into the bones of the Dominion's military elite. Our supply lines are being strangled, growled General Tarlix. Orbital platforms are disappearing overnight. Our outposts are empty. Have you encountered human vessels? Asked a cautious admiral. No, and that's the damned point. They had run every detection algorithm known, deployed deep-sweep gravimetric sensors, decrypted ancient Earth fleet codes, hoping to intercept chatter. There was none, just silence and absence, the kind that only a precise, coordinated campaign could achieve. One commander, freshly returned from a covert recon attempt, stepped forward. His face was pale, sickly with trauma. He placed a simple object on the conference table. A black coin, old Earth military, pre-silence era, engraved with 2 words, "You spoke." No one dared touch it. Reed remembered the coins. He helped draft the concept before everything went quiet. Back then, he thought it was propaganda, just a message for infiltrators, psychological ops, a deterrent. Now, he knew better. Now he realized the humans weren't threatening anyone. They were just telling the truth. They'd warned them. Again and again. With pleas, sanctions, debates, and when all of that failed, with fire. And when that didn't work, they stopped warning at all. If you spoke against Earth now, if you pushed into their space, if you whispered too loudly about domination, they didn't argue. They just marked you. And you vanished. The silence wasn't a bluff. It was a sentence. 1 week later, the Vareli Hive Queen broke protocol. Against centuries of diplomatic neutrality, she issued a direct appeal to Earth. A singular transmission. Sent across the void. Speak to us. Tell us your terms. We acknowledge your strength. We submit to your boundaries. But we need to hear you. There was no reply. Not a single frequency twitched. But on the hive world of Kasari, every human embassy structure, long abandoned and overgrown, lit up simultaneously. Not a word spoken. Just lights, a pattern, binary code, translated into one haunting phrase. You had your chance. In the solitude of his post, Reed stared at the growing list of lost fleets. He had no illusions anymore. The humans weren't returning to the Council. They weren't negotiating for power. They were done talking. Because for once in history, they didn't need anyone. Their silence was power. Uncompromising, unforgiving, unstoppable. He leaned back and whispered the words that had haunted him for years now. We warned them. Hell, we begged them, but they wouldn't listen when we screamed. So now, they'll listen to our silence. Outside his viewport, a ripple in space shimmered. Faint, almost unnoticeable. A ship? No. More likely a shadow of one. The kind of vessel that didn't exist on maps. The kind Reed wasn't supposed to know about. He saluted it anyway, because he knew what it meant. Earth was watching. And they were done being ignored. Reed didn't sleep anymore. Sleep required peace, or at least ignorance. He had neither. The silence was always there, gnawing at his brain, whispering under the hum of dying systems and recycled air. He used to dream of cities, Earth cities, loud places, crowded bars with bad synth music, arguments in spaceports, laughter during storms. Now the only sound that reached him came from beyond, garbled transmissions from doomed fleets, the last cries of commanders who finally realized they were being erased. Reed kept logs, not out of duty, those days were long gone, but because someone had to remember the truth. The galaxy didn't know what was happening. Not really. They saw shadows, whispers, rumors. They tried to form alliances, called emergency councils, debated defense initiatives. But nothing could prepare them for what they couldn't hear, because Earth wasn't just silent anymore. It had become a black hole of consequence. Ships didn't die. They vanished. Whole colonies found their memory cores wiped clean. Empires that once held half the galaxy in chains were now holding emergency evacuations from their front lines, running from an enemy that never announced itself. Reed turned his chair and stared at the long-forgotten beacon transmitter tucked beneath his workstation. A single red light blinked, slow and steady. Someone was coming. But it wasn't Earth. Not this time. The ship docked without clearance. Reed didn't fight it. The beacon had been silent for years, and the codes used weren't military grade. They were old Earth-class diplomatic access credentials, specifically marked for rogue recon vessels. Still, Reed stood armed. A pulse revolver in one hand, his other braced against the manual lock. He'd been alone too long to trust visitors. The hatch hissed open with a tired breath of recycled oxygen. And then she stepped through. Mira. He nearly dropped the weapon. Reed, she said, as if no years had passed, as if they hadn't buried half the people they loved, as if silence hadn't swallowed the world. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Because she was supposed to be dead. She looked thinner. Paler. Her left eye was augmented now, glowing faint blue under dim station lights. She moved with the slow, careful rhythm of someone who'd spent too long in black zones. Her clothes were tattered, her boots blood-stained. But her voice, still human, still warm. And that hurt more than it should have. "You gonna shoot me?" she asked eventually, gesturing to the pistol still hanging in his grip. Reed lowered it. "I might." "That's fair." Silence stretched between them, not the terrifying galactic kind, the personal kind, the kind filled with unsaid apologies and all the weight of shared trauma. Finally he spoke. "You died on Thalos 3. They said your dropship never landed." She chuckled bitterly. "It landed. Just not in one piece." He didn't ask how she survived. He didn't need to. Mira was the kind who survived things that should have killed her. That's why she'd been one of Earth's early field operatives when the silence order hit. Not a soldier, Not even a spy. Something in between. She sat, uninvited, and began pulling fragments from her bag. Data slates, encrypted cores, black credit chips laced with Earth's dead currency. "You're still listening?" she asked. "Always," he said. "Then you've heard the rumors." "More than rumors. I've seen what's left of the fleets." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "No, not the fleets, the protocol." He frowned. "You mean Protocol Zero?" "No," she said. "Worse." She slid a fragment across the table, rusted, cracked, barely holding its data integrity. He scanned it anyway. What came up made his blood run cold. Project, Perusia. Status, Initiated Authority, Earth Command, Black Silence level objective, global suppression via absolute presence. He blinked. "Perusia?" he asked. "That's not real, that was a myth, a doomsday bluff." "No bluff," she said. "It's real, and it's already begun." Perusia wasn't a weapon, not in the conventional sense. It wasn't a super fleet, not an AI virus, not a planetary bomb. It was an idea, a human presence so total, so all-consuming that no one could fight it. Not by force, not by argument, not by alliance. Perusia was the plan to become the silence, to infect the stars with the weight of humanity's absence so completely that entire civilizations collapsed under the pressure. It wasn't invasion. It was psychological erasure. Mira tapped the core. "They're not just waiting, Reed, they're pushing, quietly, everywhere, underneath everything. Human agents embedded in guilds, councils, systems, not to attack, not even to spy, just to exist." "To remind them," Reed whispered. She nodded. "To make the galaxy live every day knowing that if we ever speak again, it means someone dies." Back in Veltrak, chaos bloomed. The Zuri Prime scholar had been found dead, no signs of violence, no toxins, just gone. His ship's logs wiped. His last recorded entry simply read, "They were here." The Kalari Empress had suffered a neural breakdown during a war council. She kept repeating one phrase in her native tongue. The silence grows teeth. Systems began to collapse. Trade routes dried up. Merchant guilds disbanded in fear. Private security firms refused to patrol human-adjacent sectors, citing existential threats. Even the pirates abandoned the dead zones. There was nothing left to loot, just empty hulls and cold beacons. And then, the Graal Confederation made the worst mistake of all. They retaliated. Reed watched the transmission in real time. A Graal dreadnought had destroyed an abandoned Earth outpost near the crater belt. There were no humans on board, just old relay tech and a memorial plaque for fallen colonists. The Graal commander, arrogant and drunk on frustration, broadcasted a message across galactic channels. "Come out, Earth, speak, or hide forever in your cowardice. This galaxy does not belong to ghosts." For 38 hours, nothing happened. Then, every major comm station in the Graal sector activated simultaneously. Not one signal came from Earth. No fleet appeared. No voice responded. Just one phrase. Repeated on every screen, every system, every channel. "You spoke." And the Grail systems shut down. Every defense grid, every orbital AI, every propulsion node, offline. For 7 full minutes, the entire Graal Confederation was technologically paralyzed. Then the power returned. No ships were destroyed, no soldiers attacked. But their pride? Broken. And every other empire got the message. Reed stared at Mira. "You were part of it, weren't you?" he asked. "Perusia." She didn't deny it, just nodded once. "I was planted in the Confederation 10 years before Silence began. My job was simple: exist. Be human, work quietly, make them comfortable. Then, when the Silence order hit, I didn't run, I stayed. My presence alone was the weapon." He felt sick. "How many of you are out there?" "Enough," she said. "Not an army, not spies, just reminders. Living, breathing proof that we're still here." "And what happens if someone decides to kill those reminders?" She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Then we stop being silent." The Council sent one last envoy, an ancient species known as the Alari, neither enemies nor allies of Earth. They believed in balance, in words, in peace. They requested an audience with any surviving human authority. They came without weapons, without ships, just one diplomatic vessel, one old ambassador. They landed near Earth's outer orbit. The planet's surface was never shown. It remained veiled under automated satellites and signal blockers. They transmitted a single question. "What do you want?" No reply, until the stars themselves shifted. Dozens of dormant satellites repositioned. Their lights formed a pattern, an orbital glyph visible from every telescope in nearby systems. It was not a word, not a phrase, but every species understood its meaning. A single human symbol. Judgment. Reed knew what it meant. He stood beside Mira, watching the last of the data come through. "It's not about dominance anymore," he said. "It's about memory." She nodded. "We tried to be heard. We begged for a place at their table. They laughed, they mocked, they robbed and killed and ruled like we were animals, so we stopped asking. And now? Now, we show them what happens when the thing they feared the least becomes the thing they fear the most." He stared out at the stars. So many had mocked Earth. Now all they could do was watch and wait. The stars were no longer a frontier. They were a tomb. Ships still traveled between sectors. Of course, life went on, in the loosest possible sense. Merchants still bartered. Councils still met. Empires still sent envoys with forced smiles and sweating foreheads. But no one felt alive anymore. Not under the weight of that silence. It wasn't just absence. It was oppression. It pressed into the air, into every conversation, into the hearts of commanders who couldn't even trust their own navigation systems anymore. Earth didn't need to fire weapons or march armies. It just needed to wait and watch, while everything that had once stood tall now collapsed in on itself. And it was working. Civilizations were rotting from the inside. Reed tracked the Graal Confederation collapse from his station, another empire buckling under the weight of invisible punishment. Their entire northern trade spine had crumbled after 3 more fleets vanished. But this time, there were survivors. One shuttle. A diplomatic skiff, barely limping into neutral space with half its systems fried and its pilot brain-scarred by whatever it had witnessed. Reed pulled the signal the moment it leaked onto open channels. It was choppy, corrupted, distorted by interference, but one thing played clear: the pilot's voice. Frantic, choked, dying. They were everywhere, not ships, not soldiers, people, civilians, just standing, watching. On the decks, in the airlocks, in the comm feeds, human eyes, human faces, and not a word. Not one goddamned word. Reed shut the transmission off. He knew exactly what the Graal pilot had seen. Perusia agents. Not assassins, not warriors. Presence. Just human faces, placed with such precise cruelty it shattered the mind. 1,000 reminders that Earth had once warned the galaxy, and now it simply waited for the apology that would never come. But Earth wouldn't settle for words anymore. Mira stood beside him, watching the same footage. She hadn't spoken in hours. "You remember Ambassador Lauren?" she asked suddenly. Reed flinched. "From the Thalra summit?" "Yeah. He was the one who tried to stop the sanctions against Earth, took a vote to stall the blockade. They assassinated him for it," she said he was compromised by human ideology, poisoned his entire lineage, publicly. I remember. She turned to him, eyes hard. Perusia was greenlit that night. He was the last one who tried to save them. Them. The word lingered, as if Earth had already detached itself from the galactic we. And maybe it had. Across the galaxy, cultural infection set in. Children began mimicking human behavior, sitting silently at school, refusing to answer teachers, staring with expressionless faces until the adults broke down screaming. Entire populations adopted the posture of Perusia operatives without even knowing why. Because humanity hadn't vanished, it had become myth, and myths are contagious. The Kalari Empire banned human literature, but their own scholars secretly translated Earth's final broadcasts, studying the psychology behind the Great Silence. Some believed it was a spiritual act, others a final act of civilizational pride. A few radical priests declared it divine retribution. And in every dark corner of every council chamber, one phrase echoed, "What if they're right?" The Council of Sovereigns attempted a last measure. They called it the Unified Accord of Galactic Stability, a desperate plea to all species, human or not, to sit at one table and agree. This couldn't go on. They even offered Earth an invitation. It went unopened. Instead, one of the satellites orbiting Terra responded with a new code, different from the "you spoke" warning. This one was older, rooted in Earth's early spacefaring era. Silence is consent. It didn't make sense at first, but to Mira it did. "They're not just watching anymore," she said. "They're tallying sins." Reed stared at her. "You think they're preparing for something?" She nodded. Perusia wasn't the final step. It was just the primer. "For what?" Her reply came like a whisper. "For the sound." In orbit above the remains of Treasure 9, an ancient planet ship graveyard, something woke, a signal. Faint, primitive. Morse code, long forgotten. Reed caught it on one of his dead channels. It pulsed through his station like a heartbeat. He decoded it, line by line. Stand by. Coordinate stabilized. Waiting for trigger phrase. Operation Seraphim. Seraphim. He'd heard that name once, long ago, buried in a classified Earth Command archive, denied even to inner circle diplomats, a fallback, a kill switch, a counterweight to Perusia, something worse. He confronted Mira. "You lied," he said, placing the data core on the table. She didn't flinch. "Not lied. Omitted. Seraphim is active. I know. Perusia was meant to cripple them emotionally, but Seraphim's an execution protocol." She met his eyes. "It's not for them." He froze. "What?" "It's for us. The Perusia agents. The listeners. The ones who stayed behind." "You mean, if Seraphim activates, every last human outside Earth dies?" Reed felt his lungs collapse. Why? Because they knew too much. Because they'd served their purpose. Because silence couldn't be compromised. On the dead world of Rashael 4, a Kalari archaeologist discovered an anomaly buried beneath the ruins of an old Earth embassy. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even a beacon. It was a mirror, 9 feet tall, black glass, perfectly preserved, etched with one phrase, "What you see is what you became." No one understood it, but the council feared it. They issued an order. Bury it, seal it, destroy the records. Too late. Copies leaked. The image spread. The mirror became a symbol across the stars, a symbol of shame, a reminder that what the galaxy saw when it looked at humanity was itself. Mira stood at the edge of Reed's station, staring into the void. "You know what the scariest part is?" she said softly. Reed didn't answer. She did anyway. "It worked." "What did?" "The silence, the fear, the waiting. It worked. They're breaking without a single shot fired. He nodded slowly. And now? He asked. What comes next? Mira didn't answer immediately. She just handed him a data slate. On it, the coordinates to Earth. The real ones. Not the fake orbital loops or redirected satellites. The true core of the planet. Where the silence had begun. And where the sound would return. Because Earth never planned to stay silent forever. It just waited. Waited until the stars screamed for the sound. Waited until every empire regretted ignoring the noise. And when Earth spoke again, it wouldn't be with words. They called it Earth still. But the world Reed now approached wasn't the same planet that had once broadcast music into the stars, sent explorers to unknown moons, or begged for a seat at the galactic table. That Earth had died the day the galaxy laughed at its suffering. This new Earth? It wasn't trying to belong. It was preparing to be remembered. Reed's ship slipped into a ghost orbit. Unregistered, cold silent, masked under old diplomatic clearance codes long since expired. Mira sat in the co-pilot seat, hands steady, eyes forward. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the listening post. She didn't need to, because whatever waited down there didn't need introductions. It already knew them. Earth's surface was nothing like the archives showed. The skies were clear. Too clear. The clouds moved in slow, unnatural drifts. There were no city lights. No traffic corridors. No orbital clutter. Only a dim, golden pulse from the horizon. Like the planet was breathing, and it wasn't empty. As their shuttle descended, Reed saw them, people. Not soldiers, not agents, just humans. Walking in silent formations across old highways, standing along cliffs, sitting motionless on rooftops of abandoned towers. Children stared up at the stars, eyes blank. Elders knelt in the dust, hands clasped, unmoving. Mira finally spoke. They're preparing. For what? Reed asked. She just said, the reckoning. They landed in what used to be New London. The city had been stripped down to bone. No vehicles, no digital screens, no power. The buildings stood like monuments to the past, untouched, preserved in some kind of intentional decay. At the heart of it all, the chamber. A dome of black stone. Ancient in design but humming with tech that didn't make sense. It had no entrance, no panels, just a single seam down the center, and symbols etched across the surface in old Earth dialect. When the time comes, they will remember the ones who stayed. Reed stepped closer, his heart hammering. This is it, isn't it? Mira nodded. This is where they built Seraphim. Inside, the silence deepened. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something that listened back. Reed felt it crawl along his skin, into his lungs, behind his eyes. He tried to speak, but his throat locked. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him deeper. The chamber opened into a massive underground hollow. Rows upon rows of cryo-chambers, thousands. Human bodies suspended in stasis. Not military, not political. Just people. Reed stared, his voice barely a whisper. Who are they? Mira's answer came like a confession. The chosen, the listeners, the first who obeyed the silence. He blinked. Obeyed? Not all humans agreed with the silence. Some wanted to fight. Rage. Burn everything. So what happened? We silenced them too. She walked past a row of pods, her expression unreadable. They were given a choice: join the silence or become part of its consequence. Reed stopped at one pod. A young man, maybe 20. He looked peaceful. Why keep them alive? For the final sound, Mira whispered. And then he saw it, at the very center of the chamber, a single cryopod, larger than the others. with a name burned into the side. Commander Halen Roth. Reed's breath caught. Roth had been the first voice of Earth during the blockade. The last man to speak before humanity went quiet. "You kept him?" Reed asked. "No," Mira said. "He volunteered." Back on the surface, the world trembled. Not visibly, not violently, but in frequency. High-orbit satellites picked up a low hum resonating from Earth's core. It didn't transmit data. It didn't carry messages. It spread feeling, grief, regret, rage. The galaxy felt it like a fever in their bones. Entire empires experienced simultaneous psychological dissonance. Leaders broke down in public. Civilians collapsed under panic attacks. Something deep in the collective subconscious recognized the vibration. Earth wasn't just reacting, it was declaring. The Council of Sovereigns scrambled. Veltrak went dark for 72 hours. When it returned, half its chambers were empty. The Vorali hive had withdrawn. The Kalari were burning their own archives. The Zuri declared themselves a neutral species and evacuated their diplomatic sectors. The Graal Confederation, once a proud and brutal empire, submitted a message directly to Earth's last known relay satellite. "We were wrong. Please, speak to us." The relay didn't answer, but every screen in Graal territory flickered with a single line of human text. Too late to listen. Reed stood before Roth's pod. He remembered the broadcasts, the fire in Roth's voice, the way he'd begged the galaxy to see reason as Earth burned. He had offered everything: trade, partnership, even subjugation. And when no one listened, when the last child died on a blockaded colony, Roth stopped speaking. Now here he was, frozen in time, a living key. Reed turned to Mira. "Why bring me here?" "Because it's almost time," she said, "and someone has to remember why." She handed him a thin silver device, a neural injector. "What is it?" His voice, the last speech Roth made before the silence, the one Earth never broadcast. Reed stared at it. "Why now?" "Because when Seraphim activates, there will be no more explanations, no more memory, no more choices." He hesitated, then pressed the injector to the base of his skull. It burned, his vision fractured, his hearing shattered, and then he heard it, Roth's voice, broken, raw, final. "If you hear this, it means I failed. I tried to warn them, I begged, I lowered my pride, I sacrificed my soul, but they spat in our faces, killed our young, blockaded our breath. They taught us that speaking was weakness. So we stopped. We stopped because silence is the last thing a man gives before war. We will not shout, we will not plead, we will not explain. We will remember. And they will never forget us." Reed collapsed. Mira caught him, pulling him back from the pod. "Now you understand." He gasped. "You're going to release it, aren't you?" Mira nodded. Seraphim was never about killing enemies. It was about removing them, quietly, permanently. He looked up, horror dawning. "You're going to erase their memory of themselves?" "Yes." Mira stared at him, eyes hollow. "If we are nothing but ghosts to them, then let them live in haunted silence. Let them feel what they gave us." Above Earth, the last defense satellites powered on. Not to protect, to blind. Every known galactic sensor was scrambled. Data was rewritten. Locations corrupted. Earth disappeared from the maps. One moment, it was there. The next, it was myth. A rumor, a cautionary tale. And then the final broadcast hit every known frequency. A single sound, a heartbeat, one, loud pulse. And then silence, not absence, finality. And somewhere on the edge of the stars, an empire screamed, but no one heard them, because Earth no longer cared, because Earth never needed to speak again. It began with the maps, Star charts once marked with trade hubs, colony grids, and border lines were now missing entire sectors. Not altered. Missing. Names were gone. Coordinates returned errors. Whole star systems blinked out from records like they had never existed. No attacks, no wreckage, just blankness. At first, the councils blamed tech failures, corrupted files, a virus. But when the official galactic archive, maintained across 3 independent networks, showed identical deletions, no one argued anymore. The systems being wiped were human ones, old Earth colonies, abandoned research labs, silent relay stations. Gone. And worse? No one could remember what had been there. Even the people who once lived among humans found themselves grasping at shadows. Diplomats, officers, traders, all searching through fractured memories that led nowhere. It was like a fog had been poured over time itself. Mira called it the quietening, but Reed knew its real name, Seraphim. In the Virili archives, a historian tried to recall the name of a human inventor who revolutionized subspace propulsion. He remembered her face, her voice, her laughter, but the name, gone. He accessed his notes, blank. He opened footage, corrupted. He searched the central archive. No records found. He screamed in frustration, clawing at his head, not because he had lost information, but because he felt like he had lost part of himself. That was Seraphim's genius. It didn't kill the body. It killed the recognition. Back on the surface of Earth, Reed stood beside Mira, staring into the dark sky. No stars above, no satellites, no comms traffic. Earth was now a ghost planet, untouchable, unknown, and soon unremembered. He clenched his fists. So this is it? You make them forget us and we just sit here? Wait for the universe to move on without us? Mira shook her head. They won't move on. Why not? Because the memory of fear doesn't need a name. She turned to him, her voice cold. They won't forget what they did. They'll forget who they did it to. But the shame, the guilt, that will stay. He stared at her. And us? She looked away. We'll be the silence inside their guilt. Far across the stars, empires began to unravel. The Kalari Empress vanished from public life after she forgot her own role in Earth's sanctioning. She remembered ordering something, but not who it targeted or why it mattered. Her mental decay accelerated within days. By week's end, she had gouged her own eyes out and muttered nonsense about faces in the dark. The Zuri sent ships into the dead sectors, hoping to recover what was lost. They didn't return. Not because they were destroyed, but because they forgot where they were going halfway through the trip. One vessel flew for 87 days in a loop before running out of fuel. The crew died staring at systems that no longer had names. In an isolated Graal war camp, a former commander tried to remember his greatest battle. He spoke of enemies with strange eyes and unmatched rage. He told stories of a people who fought without rest, who stared death in the face and refused to kneel. But when asked what species they were, he hesitated. He rubbed his temples. They were from... The word stuck, wouldn't come out. Something was missing, something just outside his memory. He wept, not because he forgot, but because he felt like something important had been erased from the galaxy's soul. Reed sat in silence for hours after Mira left him. He played back the recording of Roth's final speech, not because he needed to remember it, he couldn't forget it if he tried, but because it gave him something the rest of the galaxy would never have. Closure. That was what Seraphim denied the stars. It didn't just erase. It left open wounds that would never scab, a species punished with a scar that couldn't be traced back to its source. He wondered if that was worse than death. Then the signal came. One pulse. Short, low frequency, non-lethal, but it came from outside Earth. He scrambled to the deck, checking systems. A ship, a real one, human registry, impossible. No known Earth ships had launched in over a decade. He opened the channel. No voice, just a live feed. The inside of a shuttle, dimly lit. A young girl, maybe 12, staring into the camera. Eyes hollow. Behind her, a man sat strapped to a seat, dead, throat slit. The feed glitched, and a sentence appeared on screen. There are still those who speak. Reed's heart sank. Then another line followed. They must be silenced. The feed cut. He ran to Mira. Stormed into her quarters. There are rogue elements, he growled. Still out there, still speaking. Mira nodded calmly. We know. And you're just letting them? We're tracking them. You said Seraphim was the final step. It was. Then why are there still voices? She stood slowly. Her face didn't show anger, just resolve. Because not all humans wanted silence. Some wanted revenge, attention, legacy. They defied Seraphim. Reed swallowed. And now? They've become the noise. He frowned. What does that mean? It means Earth will finish what it started. There were fewer than 9,000 humans left outside stasis on Earth, and those who violated silence were being hunted, not by drones, not by weapons, but by other humans. Reed watched the mission feed. A Perusia operative walking silently through an abandoned station. No armor. No guns, just a mirror. He found the speaker, a former admiral broadcasting Earth's betrayal. The operative didn't argue. He simply placed the mirror in front of him, and the speaker fell silent. Then shot himself. No explanation. Just the weight of reflection. Reed sat by the edge of the Earth chamber that night, staring up into the empty sky. He thought of the stars, the way they had once felt like possibility, and now how they felt like locked doors. Mira joined him. You still believe in forgiveness? She asked. He didn't answer. She smiled faintly. Neither do I. Then what's left? Silence. And when that's not enough? She looked at him. For the first time, there was sorrow in her eyes. Then we become legend, not heroes, not villains, just a lesson no one will ever name. Reed nodded slowly. And in the dark, he finally understood the truth. Earth didn't want to be remembered. It wanted to become the one thing no empire could fight, a memory that haunted, without a face. The galaxy had gone gray. Not dead, just hollow. You could still walk the markets of Thalra Prime, where vendors barked half-hearted calls for trade. You could still sit in the glowing underbars of Varna Sisix, where music hummed through the floorboards like a ghost's heartbeat. Ships still moved, goods still changed hands, systems still turned, but the color was gone. The edges of society had faded, as if someone had taken a wet cloth to the canvas of the stars and wiped until the details blurred. No one remembered the last time they laughed about Earth, because no one remembered Earth. Not truly, not collectively, and those who did, they were dying. Across the Zuri's inner colonies, an outbreak of acute identity collapse swept through the population. Entire cultural traditions unraveled without warning. Veterans reported hallucinations, memories of battles against something feral, upright, and relentless. But no name, no flags, no origin. Children stopped asking questions about history, because there were no answers. The historical record was intact, mostly, but every mention of Earth was fragmented, redacted, buried beneath corrupted metadata. The name human still existed, but disconnected from image, from emotion, from relevance. Like a lost word in a language no one spoke anymore. Worse, those who tried to remember grew sick. Seraphim wasn't done yet. Back on Earth, Reed stood in the core archives of the chamber, staring at what Mira called the echo grid. It was a living algorithm, Seraphim's second phase, not just deletion, displacement. The grid showed faces, millions of them, of humans recorded in other species' memories. But they weren't being erased. They were being rewritten. A soldier once remembered as a human sniper on Talos Ridge was now recalled as an unaligned mercenary of unknown origin. A diplomat who signed peace treaties with the Zuri had become, in their rewritten memory, a non-affiliated envoy from a dissolved state. Earth's legacy wasn't being destroyed. It was being redistributed, stolen from itself, and given to no one. Reed turned to Mira. "This isn't silence," he said. She didn't look up. "It's not revenge," he continued. "It's something else, something worse." She finally faced him. "You're right." "Then tell me what it is." She walked to the edge of the echo grid and tapped a sequence. A panel opened, revealing a secure file. Unnamed, coded in the original EarthNet dialect, archaic even for Reed's generation. She entered the key. The file opened. Inside, a single line of text. "Seraphim was never about making them forget us. It was about making us forget ourselves." The room felt colder. Reed's mouth dried. "What the hell does that mean?" Mira's voice was soft. "You think we stopped speaking to punish them? To scare them?" "That's what we were told." She shook her head. "That's what you were told. What I was told. What the galaxy was meant to believe." "Then what's the truth?" She stared at him, something breaking in her eyes. "After the blockade, after the final denials, after they let our children starve in outer colonies, something broke in Earth." "Yeah," Reed said. "Hope." "No," she whispered. "Trust in identity." She turned back to the echo grid. "We realized that if we were always going to be seen as the threat, then maybe being remembered wasn't worth it." Reed's chest tightened. "So we did it to ourselves." "We chose," she said, "to let the galaxy forget us, so we could forget them." That night, Reed couldn't sleep. His quarters were quiet. The air recyclers hummed. The wind above the chamber carried the smell of dust and static. But something inside him ached. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't anger. It was something emptier. A sense that he no longer belonged to anything. He'd spent years listening, observing, watching the galaxy unravel. And now, he realized, he was watching himself unravel too. His memories of the old Earth, his mother's voice, his sister's favorite song, the taste of real coffee, flickered like dying light bulbs in his mind. Even the name of the colony he grew up on. He couldn't recall. He grabbed the edge of the bed. "Seraphim's eating us too," he whispered. The rogue transmission returned the next day. Same signal, same girl, same dead man in the background. But this time, the girl spoke. Only one word. "Remember." Then the feed glitched. Reed leaned forward. His heart pounded. He looked at Mira, who stood behind him, unmoving. "That word," he said. "It bypassed the filter. It hurt." Mira nodded. "She's unmarked." "What?" "She's unprocessed. A human born outside the silence. A product of disobedience." Reed's voice dropped. "She's a threat." Mira's tone was iron. "She's a mistake." "And what happens to mistakes now?" Mira didn't answer, but Reed already knew. A black operative ship launched from Earth less than an hour later. No call sign, no registry. Its crew were Perusia enforcers, silent, surgical, utterly without history. They weren't going to kill the girl. They were going to clean her, reprogram the mind, fragment the memory, replace identity with nothing. She would live, but she would never speak again, and no one would know who she used to be. Reed watched the feed of the departure. he saw the black ship fade into orbit. And for the first time in years, he asked himself the question he had buried since the day Earth fell silent. What if they were wrong? What if survival at the cost of memory wasn't survival at all? What if silence, taken too far, wasn't strength? What if Earth hadn't become a warning, but a disease? He returned to the chamber, to Roth's cryopod, stood in front of it, watched the frost swirl around the glass. He placed a hand on it. "Is this what you wanted?" he asked. No answer, of course, only the silence, but something in the corner of the pod caught his eye. A symbol, one he'd never noticed before. Not Earth's flag, not a military insignia, just 3 words, scratched in by hand. One last voice. That night, Reed stole a shuttle. He took nothing but the neural injector, a recording slate, and the last known coordinates of the rogue girl's signal. Mira tried to stop him. He didn't let her speak. Because if she did, he might believe her again, and he didn't want to believe in silence anymore. He wanted to believe in voice, even if it killed him. As he broke atmosphere, a system alert flashed across the console. Unauthorized exit detected. Commencing memory trace. He disabled it manually. If Earth came for him, so be it. But he would speak before they could silence him. And maybe, just maybe, that voice would ripple through the void and crack the lie that Earth had built. Because Earth's silence had taught the galaxy one lesson. Be afraid of the day humanity speaks again. But Reed knew the deeper truth now. They should have feared the day humanity forgot itself. Reed crossed through the dead zones alone. No escort, no official clearance, no AI guidance, just silence. The kind that wasn't empty, but full, thick with things left unsaid, screaming between the gaps of sound. It clung to him in the cabin like the air wanted him to stop breathing. He didn't. He'd stolen a shuttle with a cracked nav core and a dying power cell. It didn't matter. He wasn't flying to live. He was flying to find her, the girl, the voice, the mistake. The rogue signal had pulsed from an abandoned agricultural station orbiting a fractured moon called Ishan's Drop. It wasn't even a charted system anymore. A tiny rock, barely holding its orbit, long forgotten in the stellar decay. Which made it perfect for people who were supposed to never exist. As the shuttle approached, Reed powered down all non-essential systems and drifted manually. He didn't need attention from Earth's orbital sweepers. If the Perusia operatives found him before he reached her, there wouldn't be an argument. He'd simply vanish, like all the others. But this time, he'd made peace with that. Because for once, someone had to choose sound over survival. The station wasn't guarded. It didn't need to be. The silence itself was the guard, thick and heavy with the scent of death and erasure. Reed stepped off the ramp, pulse revolver in one hand, memory slate in the other. The corridors smelled of dust and decay. Lights flickered overhead, powered by an unstable fusion coil that crackled every few minutes like a dying heart. He found her sitting alone in what used to be the hydroponics chamber. The crops were dead. But she wasn't. She sat cross-legged, barefoot, pale skin streaked with dust, her eyes focused on nothing or everything. In her hand was a mirror, fractured and stained. She looked up as he entered. No fear, no confusion, just stillness. As if she already knew why he had come. "Are you the one who's been speaking?" Reed asked. His voice cracked from disuse. The girl nodded once. No words. He lowered the pistol. "You know they're coming for you," he said. She nodded again, still silent, but not because she had no voice, because she was listening. Reed stepped closer. "You said one word," he whispered. "One word, and it cut through everything." He crouched in front of her. Why that word? Her lips moved, softly, quiet, but not silent. Because you forgot. Reed sat beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Not because of fear, because speaking felt like shaking the bones of a dead god. But then he pulled the neural injector from his pocket. "This has the last speech of Commander Roth," he said, "before Earth went quiet, before Seraphim, before the lie became law." The girl stared at it, then looked away. Reed followed her gaze to the mirror in her hand. He looked closer. It wasn't a mirror. It was a piece of old glass, shaped and polished crudely, and on the back, burned in with fire. "You are not the silence." He felt his heart break. Earth had trained its children to be weapons. But this girl hadn't been trained. She'd survived the silence. Somewhere, in the forgotten dark, a few humans had refused the script. Maybe they lived like ghosts. Maybe they died screaming. Maybe they whispered to one another in places the algorithms couldn't reach. But she had remembered. And now she was a virus to Earth's perfect forgetting. Reed looked at the mirror, then at her. "You want them to remember?" She nodded. "But do you know what they'll remember?" He leaned closer. "Betrayal, violence, shame. The face of a species that demanded to be seen and was mocked for it. They'll remember the day Earth died and came back to bury them." She didn't look away. She whispered, "Better a painful memory than a beautiful lie." The Perusia ship arrived 3 hours later. Reed saw it from the ridge, cutting silently through orbit like a blade through cloth. They'd come with full erasure gear, psychological warping modules, identity reconstruction beams, cryo spikes. Not to kill, to erase, clean, quiet, permanent. He could leave, he could run, he could do what Earth taught him to do, disappear, and let silence take what didn't belong. But the girl's word echoed in his mind. "Remember," and Roth's words followed it. "If we are to be forgotten, let it be because we screamed as they buried us." He powered up the memory slate. His heart pounded. His mouth went dry. He activated the broadcast beacon buried deep in the shuttle, an ancient, illegal transmitter tuned to frequencies older than Earth's silence. Then he stood in the open field as the Perusia team descended. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Reed spoke to the galaxy. "This is Reed of Earth, former diplomat, former listener, former ghost. I speak now because silence has become a weapon against truth, because Earth's vengeance has turned inward, because remembering our pain does not mean we must erase the past. We were betrayed, we were broken, but we were not born to vanish. This girl beside me, she remembers, and she deserves to, and so do you. You want to fear us? Then fear what we did in silence. But if you want to know us," he stared into the camera, "then listen to our voice." The broadcast reached 3 systems before Earth could cut it. But it was enough. One voice became a breach, and breaches become floods. Across Zuri space, elders cried out as memories returned like lightning strikes, sudden, painful, shattering. The face of the human engineer who saved their colonies. The name of the medic who died in their war. In Kalari archives, the name Roth appeared in forbidden files, flagged, untraceable, but alive. And in Voreli hives, a song long thought lost began playing again. A human lullaby. Earth's systems went into lockdown. Seraphim's self-sustaining cycle began to falter. And then, Earth itself did something no one expected. It spoke. Across the stars, a low transmission echoed on every frequency. Not a threat, not a warning, just a question. "Do you remember why we stayed silent?" it repeated. Once, twice, and then nothing. The Perusia ship descended toward the station where Reed stood with the girl, but they didn't deploy erasure units. They landed and waited. The lead operative removed his helmet, revealing a man with tears in his eyes. He looked at Reed, then at the girl, and said, "I remember." Reed dropped the pistol, fell to his knees. The silence wasn't broken with explosions. It cracked open with memory. Not all of Earth had agreed with Seraphim. Not all had wanted to vanish. Some had waited, hidden, for one voice to make it safe again. Now it had. And now, the galaxy had a choice: to forget again, or to listen. Epilogue. Years later, they rebuilt the council. This time, Earth did not beg for entry. It was invited. No banners, no anthem. Just one empty chair. No one sat in it. It was left in silence. To remind everyone that humanity once left the room, and the galaxy almost died trying to forget why.